Good morning and welcome to this edition of Tuesday Tips. We're so glad that you've chosen to join us as during the month of July we discuss the book of Ecclesiastes. You see, the writer of the book of Ecclesiastes was the wise man Solomon. If you read in the Bible, the book of 1 Kings chapters 3 and 4 detail how Solomon, the son of David, became king over all of Israel in Jerusalem. He prayed to God for wisdom to be able to rule his kingdom, and he was blessed with wisdom beyond all of those peers, kings, wise men of his day, the wisest man in all the East. He also was blessed with riches and proved himself to be the richest man in the world at that time as well. Solomon's riches and wisdom were legendary. However, the Bible details something very sad in the life of Solomon. He multiplied to himself foreign wives. In other words, wives that were not Jews and did not believe in the one true God, Jehovah. In 1 Kings chapter 11, the historian tells us that Solomon's wives pulled his heart away from God. 1 Kings 11, beginning in verse 3. And he had 700 wives, princesses, and 300 concubines, and his wives turned away his heart. For it came to pass when Solomon was old that his wives turned away his heart after other gods, and his heart was not perfect with the Lord or with Jehovah, his God, as was the heart of his father David. So Solomon went after Ashtaroth, the goddess of the Sidonians, and after Milcom, the abomination of the Ammonites. And Solomon did that which was evil in the sight of Jehovah, and went not fully after Jehovah, as did his father David. It even goes on to say that then Solomon built a high place for Chemosh, the abomination of Moab, in the mount that is before Jerusalem, and for Molech, the abomination of the children of Ammon. So did he for all his foreign wives, who burnt incense and sacrificed unto their gods. When we take this historical account of the wise man and rich man, King Solomon, we can understand some about the book of Ecclesiastes. You see, Solomon had done great wonders and great works. His wisdom and his wealth were legendary. And yet Solomon did not have happiness. He did not have contentness. And he kept searching even to the state of forsaking Jehovah. However, the book of Ecclesiastes paints the picture of Solomon's coming back to a realization that Jehovah is God, and man is ultimately accountable to him. That our life does not consist of only the things that we have and possess, and it certainly is not satisfied or filled by other gods, foreign gods, those which are not the one true God, Jehovah. And so for our practical pointer this week, we want to look into two distinct things that the book of Ecclesiastes teaches us about this world. Notice number one. In Ecclesiastes chapter 2, Solomon said, I said in my heart, come now, and I will prove thee with myrrh. Therefore enjoy pleasure, and behold, this was also vanity. Solomon communed with his heart. He went within himself, and he sought there to find the meaning of life, the purpose of life. He sought to find true happiness within himself. Now we know that he should have been looking to God all along, but that does not change the fact that Solomon sought this pleasure in the world. Notice it says in verse 3, I searched in my heart how to cheer my flesh with wine, my heart guiding me with wisdom, how to lay hold on folly, till I might see what is good for the sons of men, that they should do under heaven all the days of their lives. I made me great works. I builded me houses. I planted me vineyards. I made me gardens and parks. I planted trees in them of all kinds of fruit. I made me pools of water to water thereof. The forest where trees were reared. Notice verse 7. I bought men servants and maid servants. I had servants born in my house, a sign of power and wealth. I had great possessions of herds and flocks above all that were before me in Jerusalem. This would not only be David his father, but would stretch back to that of antiquity, like the rich man Melchizedek, whom Abraham paid tribute to. Notice verse 8. I gathered me also silver and gold, and the treasure of kings and of the provinces. I got me men singers and women singers, the delight the sons of men, musical instruments of all the sorts. So I was great and increased. This tells us of Solomon's life of decadence. He lived with every need satisfied and every want satisfied. You see, he did not withhold from himself wisdom. He did not withhold wine. He did not withhold wealth or power or this world's works. He built or engineered great things that you could look out and say, Solomon did that. And it would be such that Solomon would be commemorated. He would be lifted up by those around him. And yet Solomon still did not have happiness. He was still not satisfied. You see, he sought everything that the world would give him. Verse 10 of chapter 2 says, whatsoever mine eyes desired, I kept not from them. I withheld not my heart from any joy. If there was anything that Solomon thought would make him happy, he tried it. He tried women, wine, wealth, wisdom, worldly pleasures of all sorts. And yet they did not satisfy. We learn that just because something is pleasurable, just because our eyes or our mouth or our hands or our mind might want it, does not mean it's right. In Hebrews chapter 11, in describing the life of Moses, the Hebrews writer said, beginning in verse 24, by faith Moses, when he was grown up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to share ill treatment with the people of God than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season. We want to acknowledge what the Bible teaches and what many people experience. What Solomon truly enjoyed was the pleasures of sin. Sin, though it is against God's will, and though it leads down a road of destruction and ultimately to condemnation, is many times pleasurable. There are things that we can do or choose to do that relieve burdens and stress from us. Things like stealing, taking something that is someone else's that can relieve a burden from me. But that doesn't make it right. And if I'm caught, I will be punished. And even if I'm not caught, God will punish me because stealing is wrong. It's against his holy character. It's a transgression of his law. But did you know sin is pleasurable? We shouldn't pretend like it's not. And so as we think about our relationship with God, we need to see that just because our eyes want it, or our mind wants it, or our hands want it, does not mean it belongs to us. Wisdom may say, godly wisdom may say, to put off this thing that is sinful, to put it away, to withhold it from ourselves. You see, Solomon did not withhold anything that he wanted, and yet that still could not satisfy the emptiness deep within him. You see, you and I will probably try this in our lives. We will probably try to satisfy the emptiness, the lack of happiness or satisfaction by something sinful. Maybe even something not sinful. It's not God. And so we want to remember that worldly pleasures, they deceive. But they are joyful, or can cause joy, at least for a little while. But it's not lasting. This world is also deceitful in another way. You see, not only does this world offer pleasures, which can be and often are contrary to God's will and his word, but this world also offers a cruel reality. Life under the sun is not fair. As Solomon observes the world around him, he notices over and over again that this life isn't fair. And because of that, it caused him to question the meaning or purpose of life. It was only after he looked beyond the sun to see the ultimate meaning found in God that he could see that we're to fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole of man. Notice Ecclesiastes 6 and verse 1. There is an evil which I have seen under the sun, it's heavy on men. A man to whom God giveth riches, wealth, and honor, so that he lacketh nothing for his soul of all that he desires him. Yet God giveth him not the power to eat thereof. Instead, a stranger or an alien eats of it. This is vanity, and it's an evil disease. Notice in Ecclesiastes 9, beginning in verse 11. I returned and saw under the sun that the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, neither yet the bread to the wise, nor yet riches to the men of understanding, nor yet favor to men of skill. But time and chance happeneth to them all. For man also knoweth not his time, and as the fishes that are taken in the evil net, and as the birds that are caught in the snare, even so are the sons of men snared in the evil time, when it falleth suddenly upon them. Notice Ecclesiastes 10, verses 5 through 7. There is an evil which I have seen under the sun, as it were an error which proceedeth from the ruler. Folly is set in great dignity, and the rich set in a low place. I have seen servants upon horses, and princes walking like servants upon the earth. These three passages are just a small sampling to show that when Solomon observed life in this grand experiment where he sought for meaning and purpose, he could not find it only in this life. Because the cruel reality is this life, if we view it from a human perspective, is not always fair. You see, fair in our minds might be that when we have riches, we would be able to enjoy them completely. But you know the case that so often there are those who get rich, and in the course of their life they become unhealthy and unable to enjoy those riches. That's not fair, because this world is not all that matters. You know it's the case that there are those who are the fastest, but they don't always win the race. Sometimes they might trip and fall before the finish line. They might be disqualified for something that wasn't even their own fault. The battle may not be won by the strongest army or the fight by the strongest man. That's not fair. But time and chance happens on this earth because there's more to life than what's under the sun. And it may be the case that those who are foolish rise to the highest positions of power, and those who are wise and gain riches through their own work and the blessing of God are brought low and receive no dignity at all. It's not fair, but it's not only about this life. It might be that a servant rides and a prince walks. That's not fair. That's not how it should be. But that's going to happen sometimes in this world. You see, it's a cruel reality that we must remember every day. And we must teach our children these things as well. That pleasures can be found in sin, but we can abstain from them. That this life can be cruel and unfair because time and chance happens. But this life is not all that it's about. We'll notice that as Solomon observes these things, it's only when he puts away the worldly pleasures and focuses on God that he's able to truly enjoy all this life has to offer. Not by living in sin, but by pleasing God. It's only when Solomon does not focus on the cruel realities, but instead focuses on the sovereign God, that he sees that those unfair treatments are just a part of life. It's something that we all must endure as we make our way to meet our Maker. And so this life is not the purpose. You see, under the sun is not the end of the matter. When Solomon has seen it all, when he's observed it, when he's tried it, when he's verified it, he looks to the one beyond the sun and he finds his hope there, always. We would do well to do the same. You see, we're going to find that in sin there can be pleasure, but in God there is life in abundance, and eternal life promised to us hereafter. We're going to find that in this world that things are not always fair. Sometimes it will happen according to time and chance. Sometimes it will be turned upside down. That's just a part of this world in which we live, where sin reigns, where Satan still has influence, where mankind walks down his own road. But you and I know that we are on our way to meet God, because that is the end of all men. It's appointed to man once to die, and after this comes the judgment. As we continue our study of the book of Ecclesiastes, if the Lord allows this earth to stand, next Tuesday we will see what Solomon thought was the most unfair event in all the human existence: death. And it was the case that as Solomon focused on death, he just thought it's not fair. But over the progression of this grand experiment that we have revealed to us in God's Word, inspired by the Spirit, as we walk down the steps with Solomon, we will see that he learned the value of the serious, even the grave matters of life. Even death has a purpose. And so our Tuesday tip: do not be distracted by the pleasures of sin, even if we can admit that sin can be pleasurable. And do not be distracted by the cruel reality that life is not fair, because this life is not what we're living for. We're living for eternity with God. I hope you have a great week.